With this cultural data, we really want to be able to accurately represent the different parts of Southeast Asia, the different communities within Southeast Asia, and not just in English, but also in those native languages.
Welcome, everyone. In policy circles, we often talk about the AI boom as a hardware race. But there's also a human side to this technological transformation that's underway that we're doing a lot of thinking about at Google. And that's the preservation of languages and culture. There's a growing worry that the underrepresentation of local sources in AI training data can lead to linguistic and cultural biases. Joining me today is someone who's working at the heart of this challenge. Dr. Wei Jian Gang is the head of model development at AI Singapore and one of the primary architects behind the region's most significant AI model. Jian Gang, welcome to the show. What are we drinking today?
I brought Yuan Yang today. It's a blend of tea and coffee, which sounds odd, but I promise you it's good, because it kind of represents how you can have two things that don't really seem to have much in common and you can mix them together. It creates a really nice blend. I think it's a nice analogy for how Southeast Asia has all this diversity, because we have a lot of different unique cultures, but they all come together and it becomes like a larger piece of the cultural pie.
Wow, I'm a big coffee guy, but I've never thought of coffee and tea together. So it's an interesting mix. Let's take a sip.
You like it?
Interesting blend. And I think it's a good analogy for the work that you're doing at AI Singapore, where you're blending technology and local culture. Let's jump in. Maybe I'll start by asking you to say a bit more about the why. Why is data representation so important in the development of AI?
We have a lot of powerful frontier models that can do reasoning and they can do all kinds of stuff, but in English, and also with a bit more bias towards Western cultures, because that data is overrepresented in the English data, which is overwhelmingly present among all of the other languages in the world. Really what we're trying to do is we want to make sure that there is enough representation for this part of the world, the Southeast Asian region. And this is important because there's a lot of linguistic nuances, cultural nuances that come out in the way that people use language, which also covers the way that people interact with the models. So if they say things in a certain way and the model doesn't get it, then there's already a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, one of the things that has been interesting to see in our partnership with AI Singapore is how this can go wrong in terms of missing some of the local nuance or the cultural nuance. Can you share some examples of how you've seen this play out?
A while ago, we tried asking some of the frontier models, like, hey, what's a really popular, nice condiment that can go with some dish, right, in Southeast Asia? And then you might find that the model will say, oh, mayonnaise is really good or lemon butter is really good. That works, if it's fish and chips. But there's actually so many different varieties of chilies, of ginger dips, of like a blend of spices. And for example, like in Singapore, you have sambal. Indonesia as well, so many different flavors, right? If the models don't capture these nuances, these details, it doesn't really accurately reflect the cultures or the different flavors of our part of the world.
How do you teach an AI model to understand culture? For example, I know you have several initiatives going on with some interesting project names like Project Sealed, Project Aquarium, Project Sea Lion, which you've been working on since the very beginning, version 1. Can you break down these initiatives for our listeners so they can understand the various ways that AI Singapore is attacking the broader problem?
Project Sealed, it's actually a flagship collaboration effort together with Google to help to collate and create cultural data for Southeast Asia. And with this cultural data, we really want to be able to accurately represent the different parts of Southeast Asia, the different communities within Southeast Asia, not just in English, but also in those native languages. And with that data, we can then impart this cultural knowledge and all of the linguistic and cultural nuances into the models. But there is also Aquarium, which is our larger effort at trying to create a platform that can act as a data map for the region and beyond. Because what this does is it can show people what types of data there are for each language, for each culture, and what types of data are missing. So with this data map, we really hope that people will use it and they'll contribute. And then this will all add to the growing body of data that is representative of Southeast Asia. In terms of making sure that the data is as representative as possible, we actually engage the native speaker communities as well to help us to validate the training data. For instance, they'll help us to make sure that the language filters that we're using are good and they really haven't filtered out any of the informative parts that will really help the model to learn about the language, the culture. And then we also have another big piece of it where our native speakers actually help us to make sure that the way that we've done the quality bucketing for the training data is also accurate so that we're able to correctly characterize, for example, like this bucket of data is like, this is really high quality. We have to make sure that the model sees a lot of it. And then we have the middle quality and the lower tail end. But these are also important because sometimes the conversational data, more informal speech and so on, that makes it into the middle band or the lower band. And these are also very important. You have your news articles and journal articles, but you really want your model to be able to understand daily conversations, informal language use, colloquialism, slang, and all that kind of stuff as well.
I love that. I love the fact that you're bringing in the community, you're bringing in native speakers to help train the models. So I think it's fascinating the work you're doing as a builder on the ground. Can you give us some examples of how developers are putting some of this into action?
So last year, AI Singapore held a Pan-C Developer Challenge. We had over 700 participants, and there were some really great use cases that came out of it. One example was Sign to Sub, where they use Sea Lion as part of a system that can help to translate signed words into a written word. In this case, it was Cambodian Sign Language, but it can apply to other sign languages in Southeast Asia as well, right? So what it does is someone can sign, a signed word in front of a screen, and that gets captured, and then what comes out is the translated version of that signed word. And this really helps because not that many people in Southeast Asia understand the Southeast Asian sign languages, and this is a really good showcase of how AI can help with that. Recently, we also deployed Sea Lion as part of a migrant domestic worker chatbot system. Yeah, it's not just able to converse in English, but it's also able to converse in other Southeast Asian languages like Filipino, even Burmese. And we really hope that this is a step towards helping communities in the region that really, are not that comfortable in English and they need a source of truth.
Google's also been partnering with AI Singapore using MedGemma, which is a specialized LLM for the medical space. Can you say a bit more about how that's coming to fruition?
MedGemma, right now, we are trying to see whether it can help the local healthcare providers work as like an agent. So we needed to not only be able to understand English, but also the other official languages of Singapore. So Malay, Tamil, Mandarin, right? This is really important because there are people in Singapore who might not be as comfortable speaking in English, for example, like the elderly population. And we want them to be able to use their native language and speak to the model that can still understand them. So we want the model to be able to correctly capture what the patients are saying in terms of the way they describe their symptoms. And we also want the model to be able to correctly represent that information to the doctors in Singapore. Again, this is where the local context really matters because the doctors here have a certain way of doing things and we want to make sure that it doesn't break their flow. We really want the models to be able to empower the healthcare sector and we want to do it in a way that the models are actually integrated seamlessly into the domain.
Yeah, I love the way that this three-legged stool is coming together to really solve a specific challenge in the healthcare sector. You have the open source Gemma model working in conjunction with the specialized LLM MedGemma in the healthcare space, and then the localized work that your team is doing at AI Singapore. Let me pivot down to more of a policy question for you because all of the innovation that we've been talking about thus far, as I travel across the region, this is exactly what governments and policymakers want. They want that innovation. They want us to continue to push the bounds of technology and solve some of these very difficult challenges that we've been facing for decades. Mm-hmm. But one of the biggest mandates that governments and policymakers have is safety, to keep their citizens safe. How do you see that tension between innovation and safety?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're building Sea Lion itself, we need to know how capable it is in those native languages. So we have a set of benchmarks, CHELM, that has data sets in those languages, Burmese, Malay, Thai, Vietnamese, Filipino, and a few others, that will cover the language capabilities for those models. But you're right, it doesn't cover the safety aspect of it. On top of having all of this, we also have a suite of safety models really, and we build across Llama, Quen, and Gemma. We actually do find that the Gemma one, maybe because it's really multilingual, it seems to be like it's our strongest safety model. And we know this because just like how we built CHELM, we also have a safety benchmark in the native languages and English as well that really can tell us like, are these safety models actually doing their job in the native language? So a quick example here of why this is necessary is because like you could prompt the model in English, ask it to do something that it's not supposed to do, like how do you build a bomb? It probably will refuse or redirect a bit. But in a different language, a more low resource language, say like a Burmese or something, if you tell it to do that same thing, it might just give you the answer. So we really need to have safety models that are able to cater to those languages, and then they can block off nefarious prompts, and it can also block off bad responses from the model itself if necessary.
As we wrap up, you're a builder, you've been building in the space. What excites you most about the trajectory that we're on in terms of AI development and deployment?
To me, it's also more interesting to see that it's not just the big models that are able to do these things. People are also looking at how to make models that are smaller in size handle a lot of these new use cases coming up as well. And this is really important for regions such as Southeast Asia because not everybody has a lot of resources, money or compute or otherwise. So it's really important to be able to tell people that, hey, we have a model that you could even deploy locally on your laptop, your Mac or something. Even if you have to use compute, you don't have to use so much. It's pretty cheap to run. And you can use just this one model or just these like small models strung together to power your app. And we think that is a really exciting development because you want to give people access. So you want people who are in regions who have less access to even like electricity or internet, you want these people to also have access. And the only way to do it is to make sure that the technology is lightweight enough that they can deploy it regardless of their circumstances.
Well, thank you, Jian Gang, for joining the show and for giving us a bit of a window into the great work that you're doing at AI Singapore. What we learned today is if we really want to build for everyone, we do need to build for the local context. And so thank you, Jian Gang, for giving us your insights.
Thank you very much for inviting. This was a pleasure.